Today, I'm going to show you one of the biggest Cougars you've ever seen. No, I'm not talking about an older hot woman on the prowl, but one of the best right tackles coming out in the 2022 draft. Let's go. I wanted to follow up my scouting breakdown on Daniel Fa'alele with Abraham Lucas of the University of Washington State. And I want to do this for a couple of different reasons. First off, I find it's useful to look at prospects coming out of a draft who are playing the same position and back to back. I'm looking at them back to back. Because not only does this help you rank them appropriately in their positional group, but it also helps you judge and determine who really has that difference-making talent, ability, that upside to then allow you to say, this is somebody I should draft up in the top end of the first, second, third round versus picking them a little bit later in the draft. And sometimes, of course, with prospects, we can get caught up in stats or the hype of that general prospect, and really the film ends up telling the whole tale. And when it comes to Fa'alele and Lucas, not only is that at play that they both play the same position or coming out in this draft, but there's also some other surfacey similarities between these two guys. First off, both of them are slated to go somewhere near the same place in this upcoming draft, anywhere from the back end of the first round all the way up to the third round, depending on the mock draft board that you're looking at. The other thing is that both of these guys are gigantic human beings. Daniel Fa'alele comes in at a startling 6'9", 360 pounds, while Abraham Lucas is not tiny by any measure. He comes in at 6'7", and he is a big human being as well. Every bit of 6'7", as they say out the Midwest, I hear. But this is basically about, outside of they both move really well, where their similarities end, and they become very much different players. It sort of diverts. Daniel Fa'alele is a city block size of clay that you as a coach can mold into whatever you want, whereas Abraham Lucas is more refined, more polished. Fa'alele will attempt to basically just sheer physically dominate and overwhelm the defender in front of him that he's blocking. Abraham Lucas is going to hit his strike point perfectly in between the pads. He's going to keep his feet moving and pair them well with the strength of his upper body, and he's always going to be in the right place in the right position. This is not to say that there isn't some special traits to Abraham Lucas and his sterling technique. In particular, a couple things: he snaps out of his stance as fast as any right tackle I've seen recently in scouting. He's got a rubber band-like snap. This is not a first step quickness thing. This is just him getting out of his stance quickly. And as I said before, both him and Fa'alele do move kind of absurdly well for guys their size. Usually when you get a guy that's 6'6" and on up coming into the pro level, you're getting a lumbering guy, and it's very hard for them to succeed. You don't see a lot of them on the pro level getting into the 6'7", 6'8", 6'9" range because of that lumber factor. And when you look at the modern day rushing attacks across the league, they're asking their linemen more and more to move in space. Well, Fa'alele can absolutely do it with his rugby background and his basketball background. And the same thing is true with Lucas, almost if not more so. He, with that snap out of his stance, gets out of his stance quicker than anybody else on the offensive line and sometimes defensive line. But then he pairs that with his mobility, and he can do all of the reach blocking. He can do all of the cross block if you need him to come down and play a wham block across the formation post snap. You need him to get in the second level on the linebacker. He can get down there and do that and do it well with acumen. He's a very smart player as well, very heady. He goes out there with a plan of attack and he executes the plan of attack. As well as he's got great feet that he mirrors the defender well in pass protection, which is, again, unusual for a guy that is this big. So let's dive into this guy. Let's look at what his film has to offer and see if maybe Abraham Lucas just might be the future right tackle of your Seattle Seahawks. All right, folks, you know how I like to do, and that is let's start with a highlight tape. It gives us a good initial feel for what a player does great right out the gate. It is by no means the only metric by which you should use in order to evaluate a college football player, but in this case, it does give us that first glance look at Abraham Lucas to see what we got here. And I think it is also telling you of an offensive lineman with a highlight tape here, as you don't see that very often. Now, the thing that's going to jump out to you about this initial play here, and part of what I like this highlight film started out with these first couple of plays, is we get a little bit of the mentals here with Lucas. We get to see his intelligence on the football field. And so what he's going to be asked to do initially here is block down on the defensive tackle and first hit him, but not stay on him, but get down to the second level. He does so very cleanly on this play. It looks like he's not necessarily doing a whole lot, but he actually is. And a lot of it's just by his body positioning and being as big as he is. You'll notice on this play, not only does he do a good job of helping with that defensive tackle with his guard, but then he gets down to that second level, gets a hat on the defender, and makes a third defender sort of have to take more of a fortuitous route in order to get to the ball carrier, allowing the ball carrier to pick up some more yardage. Not too much fancy here, just picks up the stunt very well, starts out blocking one guy, slides over to pick up the stunting defender coming around his side, does it with ease, does it with purpose, has no issues on these type of things, and you see this on his tape quite a bit in the plus column. Again, very smart, very aware, very heady. These are things that you're going to see in part and parcel from Abraham Lucas all the time. This next play against the USC Trojans is, I believe, a trademark type of play from Abraham Lucas. And what you see here is an ability to not only land his hands correctly here in the run game, where he's got him on the inside part of the chest plate, no chance he's going to get called for holding here, but he does an excellent job as well of pairing his feet with his hands in order to generate that torque, that power to push that man up the football field. His feet are moving, his hands are staying locked in, and it's all working together. You ideally would love to see this out of all your offensive linemen, but quite often on tape, especially at the college level, you'll get guys that are more top heavy, and so they're trying to generate all their power and strength with their arms and their chest. Whereas with him, it's coming from his base and then coming up to his chest and into his hands. He is not the most naturally powerful guy out there on the football field, despite his real big size. Fa'alele was much further in that realm of things. But what he does has an ability to generate similar modes of strength by using those feet and using those hands and using his great technique all together. Okay, so here you've got the one Thibodeau snap that is to be excited about, and they show it twice, I think, for that reason. We're going to go back here in this tape in a second and look at some of his reps with Thibodeau. But in this particular one, this is a good rep for him. The other ones weren't as good. Okay, on these next couple of cut-ups, I'm just going to show a little bit of his ability here in pass protection. We're not going to dive too far into the details of these. You're just seeing some of his effortless ability in pass protection. Nothing fancy here. He just seems to win his rep and win on the often. When he gets his hands on the defender, there doesn't seem to be a secondary move that you can counter with to do anything with. Now, there are ways that the defenders are able to sort of beat him off that initial point, right? If they can keep his hands off of him with sort of a double move, which we'll see from Thibodeau in here soon, or a bull rush move, that can give him some issues. But if he gets his hands on you and you don't win off the initial point of the rep, it's over with. It's done. It's game over. And not only does he win the rep, but he will tend to even sometimes get you 6, 7, 8 yards outside the pocket where you're not even getting close to sniffing a pressure, a hit, or a quarterback sack. So on his highlights, we got to see one of the plays from this game against 20th ranked USC in this affair, but I also want to dive into a couple of other plays. And to start it off, we're going to look at a few of the running plays from Washington State. And on this play, along with the one I'm going to follow up with, we're going to get to see a little bit of his ability of movement in space. Lucas does a lot of very interesting things, especially if you have a movement-based run game. If you're not mano-a-mano, which I don't think he'll be as good a fit in, man-on-man, but you're actually in more of a zone-based stuff, or you run a lot of duo things. I mean, he could be really good with that type of stuff. And what you get to see here are sort of 3 different traits on this particular play, and the one I'm going to follow it up with that really stand out for me with him. First off, notice how quickly he gets off the snap. He is the first man of all the linemen to start moving. You see this very often on his tape. He has that, as I was speaking about at the start of the video, a snap-like ability to get out of his stance. It's like a rubber band. Then notice his ability at 6'7" to then be moving in space, getting across the formation quickly. And then the third aspect of it, of course, is to actually lay the block. Very often we see these offensive linemen, when they move, get out into space, maybe even arrive on time, but they're not able to get their hands on the defender and they just whiff. He doesn't here. He lands a very nice block, which helps open up the hole, paves the way for the running back to get a big gain. Not a replay here, folks. This is actually a couple plays later in this game where, once again, I think having had some success on the back of it earlier in the drive, the Cougs go back to this play. Again, Daniel goes back across the formation, this time finding a defensive back rather than a linebacker, but again, lays the block cleanly, again, moves well in space, arrives on time, and again, a nice little pickup by the running back on the play. Here we've got a power run out of shotgun. And the thing you notice from what the USC Trojans are doing here is they're trying to drop a lot of guys into coverage. And this isn't just a light box. This is nearly an empty box. You have 2 down defensive tackles here, a couple guys standing up at the top of the screen. Washington attacks thusly, which is to basically go right over the top of Lucas's side. Lucas in the guard laid down the double team, but gets me really most excited about this play, and it's a very subtle thing. It's nothing about the physicality, what he's doing, or his technique. It's more of the timing, and again, this goes to some what we talked about at the start of this video is intelligence and his headiness. He lays the block down, makes sure that they get good drive up the field with that defensive tackle initially 3-4 yards. But then as soon as he feels that linebacker coming up to help, he breaks off of the defensive tackle, goes over the linebacker, helps him out, again, helping to clear a nice run. This is a 35-0 contest at this point in the second quarter. This thing is already basically over with. But with that said, again, this shows up over and over with him on tape, an ability to go to one block, help out, not just do it for show, right? Not just, hey, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing in the play, which is put my hands on the defensive tackle, but actually doing it with force and then breaking back off and still making sure he has enough time to arrive on the second closing defender. All right, we're just going to keep it on moving here, folks. And now we've got some tape against Arizona State, a little bit of an easier challenge here for our Cougars and Mr. Lucas. And I like this rep quite a bit, not because it's a dominating rep, but because it's, again, a rep that shows off some of the smarts of Lucas, shows off some of his quickness off the snap, and he kind of saves this play from being completely something that could have even been a turnover by the way that this defensive end plays this particular play. Now, notice off the gate here, you have what would be almost a 4-3 under type of look with a single man high almost, where 4 down defensive linemen are here, stand-up linebackers on the outside of Lucas's shoulder. And when you notice, look at the left defensive end. He is on the inside shoulder in his alignment of Lucas. This is what they would call 4-eye or 4 inside technique. And what this is interesting from my perspective is when he shoots the gap off the snap, he basically is attacking that inside shoulder of Lucas, and it's putting Lucas in a little bit of a bind. It's by a leverage standpoint, the guy is set up to sort of beat him if he goes to that inside point of his shoulder, and especially if he's going to actually be shooting the gap rather than, let's say, 2-gapping where he's got to sort of hold his ground. He is flying up the field to try to make this play. Lucas recognizes it and reacts as quickly as he possibly could, given, again, the leverage alignment pre-snap, which puts him in a little bit of a pickle. Good job on this play by Lucas to get this guy cleared through as well as he can. Again, not a dominating rep, but a rep that, again, shows his ability to be smart. I'd reckon to guess here that he's probably more responsible in this case for the defensive end, or for the outside linebacker, I should say, rather than the defensive end. But nonetheless, good rep. On the next couple of snaps, we're going to get a real good feel for why Abraham Lucas is so good in zone. We've already seen him come back across the formation post-snap and lay a wham block. Well, here, we're going to get to see him utilize the full complexity of a zone scheme in these back-to-back 2 plays. And allow me to unpack this just really quickly a little bit. You can have times in a zone scheme where an offensive lineman can have a responsibility that he's being asked to do 2 things, and he doesn't get either of the 2 things done, or he does one of the things really good, and then he doesn't do the other at all. And what we get to see on these back-to-back plays with Abraham Lucas is that he does both of the responsibilities of what he's required to do and executes them both wonderfully. And this is very hard to do. It takes a lot of snaps, as Abraham Lucas has had here at the college level. It takes a lot of repetition to get there. It's a timing thing. It's a feel thing. And Abraham Lucas has it. What you're going to see here off the snap on both of these plays back to back is first, Abraham Lucas comes off the blocks. And he's going to help out his fellow brother, his right guard, right next to him on that big, stout, one-tech defensive tackle. He doesn't commit fully into the block as though he was going one-on-one with him. He's just trying to make sure, partly he accomplishes this with body positioning, but he wants to make sure that the hole is going to be cleared and that we've got that defensive tackle under control. He's not penetrating. We've got him sealed off. So what he does is he gets both hands in there, gives just it's a very subtle little push to the defensive tackle, but then he is quickly on to his next responsibility number 2 in the play, which is to get to the second level in the linebacker. And not only does he get to the linebacker, he lays one hell of a block. The play is blown up because not a lot of other people did their job on this play, but the one-tech defensive tackle ends up on a knee, and the linebacker just about practically lands up on his back. And here we get to see a similar play to the last one, where again, Abraham Lucas comes off the blocks, helps out a little bit on the one tech before he's got to get downhill to the linebacker. And again, he handles this very fluidly. There's no issues. He's not trying to lay a heavy-handed punch initially off the snap, but you got to get enough of a little bit of push to cause a little bit of disruption there with the defensive tackle before you then get to the linebacker in space. So often when I'm watching tape of these guys, you see the linemen do one or the other, and it's very hard for them to accomplish both tasks proficiently. But that's exactly what Abraham Lucas does. Are you ready to rumble? All right, here's the matchup we've been waiting for. Here it is. Mr. Top 5 first-round potential pick, Thibodeau, going up against Abraham Lucas, potential first-round pick. And we're going to get to see a collection of snaps here that I put together with these two guys going mano-a-mano. And there's a little bit to take away from this, though I will say Abraham adequately holds up relatively well. There are a couple things that do give me some worries with him, and some of those are going to be some snaps we're going to look at that go beyond this with Thibodeau, because he actually does a very good job with Thibodeau in this game. What we're going to see out the gate, though, is it's going to look like he loses this rep right out the gate, and technically he kind of does. Thibodeau just makes a play that shows you here why he's going to be a top 5, top 10 first-round pick in this upcoming draft. He starts out in that wide 9 type technique and then quickly comes across the face of Lucas, which is not what Lucas is going to be expecting there, obviously. Lucas is going to be expecting with Thibodeau on that outside shoulder of his for Thibodeau to go wide, and instead he just totally crosses him up. So part of this is Lucas being surprised. Part of this is also just Thibodeau being an athletic super freak. On this play, we're going to get an outstanding rep by Abraham Lucas against Thibodeau. He is, again, Thibodeau lined up in that wide 9 type technique, which is going to naturally challenge Lucas to the edge. It's a little bit like the defensive end when they're lined this wide. They're really getting almost a built-in advantage against the tackles of that extra step, or challenging the tackle to get an extra step in his slide kick technique in order to meet him at the end of the arc. Now, Thibodeau doesn't do anything fancy here outside of I'm going to attack you with twitch, explosiveness, quickness, and he just tries to get upfield as quickly as he can, challenging that outside shoulder of Abraham Lucas. Lucas meets him with great footwork, but above all else, that quick snap out of his stance that we've talked about many times before that doesn't necessarily even require athleticism, though it's an athletic move. It's just his little built-in sort of superpower to how he plays the position. But a great rep nonetheless. On this play, Abraham Lucas is just going to get straight beat by Thibodeau. And it's understandable why. Look, Lucas is a fairly athletic lineman for his size, but Thibodeau is twitchy, explosive. He's got good bend. This is why he's going to be a top 10 pick, and he beats Lucas with those traits. Now, some of this is also a little bit of the quarterback backing up at the snap here, which does not help Lucas out rather than setting up in the pocket, which just basically almost gives Thibodeau a little bit of a beeline towards the QB. But with that said, you can see here right off the gate that Lucas basically loses instantaneously as he bails out of his normal slide step technique here and is turning his body sideways in pursuit of Thibodeau before he gets to that arc edge. So, not a great rep here for Lucas, but again, you're getting beat by one of the best in college football last season in this respect. Now, of all the things in Abraham Lucas's game that would give me concern, and there's not a lot of things in his game that give me concern. I think he's a pretty clean prospect. But there is one little issue that stands out in watching the tape of him that props up again and again. If the defensive end / outside linebacker can get him to essentially set his feet early, they can kind of double move him to get back around the arc. And he really can struggle with that at times. Now, it's hard to fool him. This is a smart cat. No pun intended for that, Cougar. And he's got really great feet. He's mobile. He knows how to get his sets right to where you're not going to get him to take bad steps or get him to set and anchor down early. But indeed, that's what happens on this rep with Thibodeau. He gives him a little inside shake move, which gets Lucas to sort of prematurely set as he fears Thibodeau coming across his face, and then goes back out across him over the edge. Doesn't get the sack, But again, this is a rep to me that Lucas does lose, and he loses it off that double move. So that's the one thing to watch for in Lucas as he does go to the pro level of if that double move factors back in, if defenders really work him in that respect, or if he starts to find a way to somewhat solve it. This is one of Lucas's better reps against Thibodeau here. Kayvon comes off the blocks, and he's looking to just basically give him a bull rush. He's been, of course, giving him a couple moves up into this point, sort of setting him up. We've seen him do the inside out. We've seen him just try to attack with speed to the edge. Well, here he just gets right up into the kitchen of Abraham Lucas, and Lucas is having none of it. He pushes our guy down to the ground, gets him off his feet, and whenever you get a pass rusher off their feet by the end of the rep, that's one good damn rep. On our last rep here between Thibodeau and Abraham Lucas, we're going to have Lucas win in this one, and he's going to win it against that very move I just talked about a second ago that I was worried about, which is when the defender coming off the edge gives him sort of two different moves and tries to get him to set up early. Here, Lucas doesn't bite. As you see, first Thibodeau goes to the outside shoulder and seems to attack that way, then comes back inside with a hard step to the inside. Lucas still just remains patient, stays in his slide, and ends up just receiving Thibodeau on that same path that he started out from the snap of the football. Nice rep, nice block by Lucas. Nothing fancy again here, just handling the athleticism and speed. And again, now here in this game, we saw him get beat by a little bit earlier on. Here he corrects it a little bit later on in the game. As we finish up with our tape look here at Lucas, I want to show a couple of other reps here from this Oregon game, some bad, some good. These next couple of reps I want to show back-to-back that are, again, a little on the issue side of the column for me with him. And again, he doesn't have a lot of issues to his game. But he does struggle as well in pass protection just a little bit, as is in the running game. I've seen him get kind of beat up by it as well as against the power guys, the guys that are going to give him a good bull rush. We, of course, saw him neutralize on this video earlier Thibodeau in the bull rush and a couple of other pass rushers in that Arizona State game. But against a guy who might be a little legitimately more stronger than some of those guys were that he was dealing with, more of your traditional 4-5 tech defensive end, more of those power guys that do tend to reside on that side of the line, is it going to be an issue for him going further into this league? Is it going to be a little bit of a problem for him? Because you see on these two reps, he's getting knocked back really quickly. In one respect, he's having just getting long-armed all the way into the backfield. Some of this is going to be a leverage loss on his part because he's such a gargantuan human being. But some of it is also, is he going to be able to be strong enough to hold up against those big dogs down there on that line? I believe he will be. Some of this will come, I think, with a little bit of time, but some of it is also still just a little bit of a concern when you're looking at him. And again, we're talking about why isn't this guy going to be a certain top 15 pick versus later in the first round, probably maybe up even into the top of the second, is because there are a couple little things there with his game that you do have as concerns. And while they're small concerns, they are nonetheless concerns that might not be able to be overcome. He may not ever develop enough of that power to handle those bull rushers. He may not be athletic enough or able to move his feet quick enough to where if he false sets down on his anchor to be able to then correct and get back to the second move of the pass rusher. We're going to go ahead and finish up with a couple of nice plays here by Abraham Lucas here against Oregon, and kind of two unique plays. On the first one, and as I always say, this is, of course, a Seahawks scouting channel, so we look through the lens of these prospects to how they would fit, first and foremost, with my Seattle team. You draft Abraham Lucas, I think you're going to be pretty happy with his right tackle play wherever he goes. But one of the things that stands out to me in how he would fit here with our scheme, as we just brought aboard a new offensive coordinator last year in Shane Waldron, is that he has an ability in zone to move in space, to get to the second level, to come back across the formation and lay wham blocks. These are all going to be components of the new Seattle Seahawks offense as we do go forward. Another component within that is reach blocks. And reach blocks are, of course, asking linemen to do quite a bit on a play. Not only do you need to block your man, but you got to get a couple steps in space to go arrive at that man. And he might be moving in the opposite direction away from you at the snap, making it even harder to get to him. And so what I mean by this is, as you can see on this play here, Abraham Lucas is lined up where naturally you would think that his responsibility on this run blocking play would be either to number 44 or number 1. That would be how you generally have it blocked up. But because the Cougars are trying to get a bit of a numbers game to the left side of the offensive formation, the defense is right, you're going to see Lucas come down onto the defensive tackle, and he's going to try to clear him out the lane. This is a reach block. Again, a very vital piece of this offense. This is going to allow the guard to then move downhill as well, where they hopefully can create a bit of a numbers game to one side of the football field. And indeed, Abraham Lucas pulls this block off sensationally. He gets not only to the defender on time, but is even able to cleanly and clearly drive him out of the hole with authority. This is going to be the final play we're going to take a look at with Abraham Lucas, and it's one that should get you hyped. It shows off a lot of the traits that he brings to the football field. Get a taste of his technique, a little bit of his ability to move in space despite being as big as he is, and especially the smarts and intelligence that he plays with. What you see here at the snap, and let me sort of set the stage for you a little bit here, is it's a 3rd and 10, of course. They've got a long way to go, the Cougs here on this one, and they've got a lot of pass rushers coming up to the line of scrimmage to scare that quarterback, because obviously away defensive coordinators can kind of like to go in 3rd and long situations. We'll just bring a blitz that won't allow for the long developing routes to develop, and the quarterback will be caught in a bind and having to throw the ball earlier than he wants to, and then we will get our 3rd down stop. So the Oregon comes up and they show a lot of guys at the line of scrimmage in somewhat of a blitz look. Now, this has got to key in a little bit, Lucas, as far as when you see this one defender coming down here right up over the center, we got maybe a 5-man front here. I might have to help out inside before I get outside to my guy. Now, post-snap, everybody drops back into coverage. They deal with just the front 4, but still Lucas helps off the snap with the defensive tackle. He helps out his right guard to make sure he's neutralized. I think some of this is also that Oregon has taken one of their edge rushers here and kind of moved him inside. And so he helps him out a little bit. This seems to indicate then to the defensive end, who's rushing number 44 there on the far left side, that I'm going to have a free pathway here to the quarterback. I'm going to be able to just go unencumbered to the QB. But instead, because Lucas is as smart and quick and has a good sense of timing and understanding it in this game, he is able to first help out on the first block, neutralize that, and then slide back out to the defensive end in time to also get his block laid there. Now, the play is blown up because the left guard basically decides to just stand up and look at everybody on the football field on this play. So the other side of the offensive line completely fails the Cougs here, but it's not because of Lucas. He's awesome. And again, he's going to bring this to your team no matter what team he goes to. I'm not going to lie. This one took me a little bit of time to fully wrap my arms around what Lucas is going to be. And don't get me wrong, Abraham Lucas is going to be a tremendous football player at the next level. He'll be a solid starter in this league, bare minimum. But it was the attempt on my part to really make the determination of, is this guy more of a mid-second round to early third guy, or is he a guy that should properly be vaulted up, maybe even to the top of the first round, maybe even into the teens? And he's not necessarily easy to make that determination because there's things that are great about his play. He's got some special traits, but there's a few things as well that give you some concerns. Specifically, I'd say more than anything else, really in pass protection. When you get a guy like Thibodeau, who is a tremendous pass rusher, who's going to go top 5 in this draft, and let's face it, it's not going to be every week, even at the NFL level, he's going to be having as an explosive and twitchy guy as Thibodeau is, going across from him over on that right side. But when Thibodeau basically gave him the little stutter step, or give him the 2 move, where he sort of shows him inside and gets him to sort of set in his anchor and lean into that inside to absorb the contact, and then Thibodeau would just break outside of his outside shoulder. He could go into that Oregon game, he'd go to that move a few different times, and there wasn't a whole lot that Lucas could do to stop it. That same Oregon game, and then I saw it a couple times in other tape, there are moments and times too where a bull rush can give him a little bit of problems. This is disconcerting a little bit because, of course, he's 6'7", he's 340 pounds. Nobody should be able to push him back, really. Now, he's going to lose leverage battles at times, which that'll hurt you in the bull rush game, no doubt about it. But there were moments where he was just getting sort of walked back in without any of the strength to hold up there, which was a little surprising at times and makes me worried about now, you're not getting a twitchy rusher this week, Abraham. You're getting now the bull rusher. And if you're having sort of fits between both, you can't stop kind of either. That makes me a little worried with him. Again, this is acknowledging he's going to be a solid starter in this league. He's going to be a guy who can potentially give you Pro Bowl potential when he gets to the next level. They're not glaring, horrible issues. His tape is solid most of the time in pass protection. He's effortlessly shutting down the guy across from him. And it's not going to be Thibodeau he's going against every week. Again, acknowledging that. I like Abraham Lucas quite a bit. And if our Seattle Seahawks are looking at him in the second round, where they may be picking high into the second round, I would be happy with that pick. I am a guy who has been beating the drum for a very long time for this team to start building in the trenches. When you look at offensive coordinator Waldron, who is in his first year, and I'm going to at this point at least anticipate you don't fire an offensive coordinator after one season. That being the case, you're going to need to move to more mobile offensive linemen that Waldron's scheme calls for. This is a sea change, as Coach Carroll has tended to lean towards the big, gigantic people mover types who struggle in pass protection. Now Waldron needs the mobile guys, the guys that can go across the formation and lay a wham block like we saw Abraham Lucas do, or get into the second level on a linebacker, or get out in the screen game, where you see this year with our Seahawks, our linemen struggling to get out in the screen, especially to running backs, because they're just not quick enough to get out there in space. This is a guy who would help you to do all of those things. He'd be a perfect schematic fit. I have some reservations about a few little tiny holes in his game, but I don't know that they're permanent holes or the things that he can eventually fix. He's got a lot of upside. He's got a lot of things that just come naturally to him at the position. He's refined. You're not going to have to teach him sort of the basics. He's got that stuff day one, which will help him maybe for more of the advanced stuff right off the jump. But I like Lucas a lot. He's a local kid. Let's bring him on over here, Seahawks. Let's make him the number one pick in our draft. Since we don't have a first rounder, I'd be perfectly satisfied. And if your team is the one that's picking Abraham Lucas day one, day two, you should feel pretty damn good about it because you got yourself a pretty good player. The analytics tell us the offensive lines in the modern age are no better than their weakest link. Well, I'll tell you this, Abraham Lucas is never going to be your weakest link. In fact, he's going to be one of your strengths. So it's not sexy. It's not that wide receiver going down the field, catching everything you throw at him, but it's something that helps your team win and may just help your team win Super Bowls. My name is Brandon Kane. This is Seahawks Scouting. Thank you for watching. And if you do like, please hit the subscribe button and like. And don't you forget, don't you ever forget. Go Hawks.